The room was packed. Camera crews lined the walls. Reporters leaned forward in their seats. Executives in tailored suits whispered to one another while engineers hovered nervously near a metal barrier. In the center of the room sat a machine that was supposed to change everything. A polished engine mounted to a test stand. Spotlights reflected off its chrome surfaces. Cables snaked across the floor. A massive digital display waited behind it, ready to show numbers that would supposedly rewrite the future of American performance. Outside the building, a crowd had gathered. Inside, the air smelled like fuel, hot metal, and anticipation. This wasn't just another corporate demo. This was a statement. Millions of dollars had been poured into this moment. Years of development, endless late nights in secret laboratories. A bold promise that one company had finally built the next great American engine. If it worked, it could reshape racing. If it failed, well, no one in that room wanted to imagine that. But in just a few minutes, they would have to. And it would happen live, on camera, in front of the entire automotive world. What most people in the audience didn't know was that the engineers standing near the test stand were already uneasy, because the engine sitting there had a reputation. Inside the company, it had earned a nickname, the Grenade. The story of how it got that name started years earlier. At the time, the American performance market was going through an identity crisis. Stricter emissions laws were tightening every year. Fuel economy regulations were squeezing horsepower out of new cars. And meanwhile, overseas competitors were starting to dominate the conversation. Turbocharged engines from Europe, precision-built power plants from Japan. Suddenly, American automakers were being mocked for losing their edge. For decades, the US had ruled muscle. Now critics were asking if that era was over. One major manufacturer refused to accept that. Behind closed doors, executives approved a risky project. They wanted an engine that would remind the world what American engineering could do. It needed to be powerful, loud, unapologetic, and fast enough to dominate both the street and the track. But more than that, it needed to restore pride. The project was given to a small team of engineers working out of a research facility in the Midwest. Most of them had spent their careers building racing engines. Some came from stock car programs. Others had backgrounds in endurance racing. A few had worked on experimental power plants that never made it past the prototype stage. They were brilliant, but they were also under pressure. Corporate leadership wanted results fast, very fast. Competitors were announcing new engines every year. Performance numbers were climbing. Social media was amplifying every win and every loss. If this engine succeeded, it could power a new generation of performance cars. If it failed, millions would disappear overnight. The engineers started with a simple goal: build something outrageous. They wanted an engine that could handle extreme power levels without flinching, something tuners could push far beyond factory limits, something racers would trust when everything was on the line. But ambitious ideas come with dangerous consequences. Early prototypes showed promise. The engine produced incredible power during initial dyno tests, far more than expected. Executives were thrilled. But then the first problem appeared: heat. Under extreme loads, temperatures started climbing faster than predicted. Engineers adjusted cooling systems. They revised internal components. They ran test after test. For a while, the problems seemed manageable. Then came the explosions. The first one happened late at night during a dyno session. Only a handful of engineers were present. The engine had been running hard for nearly an hour when the test operator noticed something strange in the readings. Pressure spikes, temperature swings. Then a loud metallic crack echoed through the room. A split second later, boom, shrapnel blasted through the test cell window. Metal fragments embedded themselves in the opposite wall. The dyno operator dove under a desk. Smoke filled the room. When the dust settled, the engine block was split open. One engineer stared at the damage and quietly said the words that would stick: "It blew like a grenade." That night, the nickname was born. Management wasn't pleased, but they also weren't ready to stop. Every groundbreaking engine has setbacks, they argued. Racing programs deal with catastrophic failures all the time, so the team kept working. Months passed. The engineers reinforced internal parts. They redesigned key components. They added safeguards meant to prevent catastrophic pressure spikes. Each new version performed better, most of the time, but the explosions never completely stopped. Sometimes it happened after long test sessions, sometimes it happened suddenly, without warning. One prototype detonated during a private track test, destroying thousands of dollars in sensors and data equipment. Another exploded on the dyno just minutes after hitting peak output. Every time it happened, engineers scrambled to understand why. And every time they thought they had solved it, another engine failed. Inside the company, opinions started to split. Some executives believed the engine was still worth saving. Others wanted the program shut down immediately. But by that point, the company had already invested tens of millions of dollars. Canceling the project would mean admitting defeat. So, leadership made a decision. They would go public. A massive live demonstration would prove the engine's potential. If the demo succeeded, the company would announce a new performance platform built around it. Production cars, factory racing programs, aftermarket partnerships. The entire future of the brand's performance division could revolve around this engine. But the engineers were nervous. They knew the risks, and they knew the engine's history. Still, corporate momentum was unstoppable. The demonstration was scheduled. Invitations were sent to automotive journalists, influencers, dealers, even racing teams. The company wanted the entire industry watching, which is how we return to that room. The engine sat on its stand, gleaming under studio lights. A senior engineer stepped forward to address the audience. He explained the vision behind the project, a new era of American power. He talked about durability, performance, innovation, but if you looked closely, you could see something in his eyes: uncertainty. Behind him, a technician prepared the engine for startup. Fuel lines connected, sensors activated, cameras zoomed in. Across the internet, thousands of viewers were watching the live stream. The technician gave a signal. The engine roared to life. The sound filled the room instantly, deep, violent, raw, the kind of sound that makes car enthusiasts grin like kids. The digital display began showing numbers: horsepower climbing, torque climbing. Applause broke out in the audience. Executives exchanged satisfied glances. This was working. The engineer signaled for more throttle. The engine screamed louder. Numbers continued to rise. The livestream chat exploded with excitement. People were already speculating about the cars this engine could power. Then something changed. A slight fluctuation appeared on the display. One of the engineers noticed it first. Pressure readings. Not normal. Another spike appeared. The engineer frowned. He turned toward the technician. But before he could say anything, a deafening bang ripped through the room. For a fraction of a second, no one moved. Then the explosion hit. The engine shattered. Metal fragments blasted across the test stand. A fireball flashed upward. The sound echoed through the building like a cannon. People screamed. Cameras dropped. The live stream cut instantly. Smoke poured from the destroyed engine. Security rushed into the room while stunned engineers stared at the wreckage. The machine that was supposed to save the company's reputation had just blown apart in front of the world. Within minutes, clips of the explosion began spreading online. Automotive forums lit up. News outlets picked up the story. What happened? Was the engine unsafe? Did the company know this could happen? Inside corporate headquarters, panic set in. Stock prices dipped the next morning. Executives held emergency meetings. Public relations teams scrambled to control the narrative. The official statement called the incident an unexpected mechanical failure during testing. But former engineers began speaking anonymously to journalists. They told a different story, a story about repeated explosions, about internal warnings, about an engine that had never fully solved its instability problems. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. What was supposed to be a triumphant launch became a public relations nightmare. Dealers started asking questions. Racing teams backed away from potential partnerships. Regulators quietly began asking for internal testing records. And the company's performance division, once proud of its ambitious project, went silent. Within months, the engine program disappeared. No production version, no racing debut, no official cancellation announcement, just silence. The destroyed prototype was quietly removed from the test facility. Most employees were reassigned to other projects. The livestream footage vanished from official channels. But the internet never forgets. To this day, the explosion clip still circulates in automotive circles, a shocking moment frozen in time. A machine built with enormous ambition, failing in the most public way imaginable. And here's the part that still raises questions. Years later, a few engineers who worked on the project have hinted at something strange. According to them, the explosion during the live demo might not have been random. They claim that unusual pressure behavior had appeared in earlier tests, behavior that should have triggered an automatic shutdown, but during the live demonstration, the safety system never activated. Why? Some believe the shutdown threshold had been adjusted, possibly to allow higher power numbers during the demo. Higher numbers meant better headlines. Better headlines meant stronger investor confidence. But officially, the company has never confirmed this. No final report was ever released publicly. No engineer has spoken on record about the exact cause, which leaves one haunting question. Was the engine truly unstable, or did someone push it past its limits, knowing the risks, just to impress the world for a few minutes? Because on that day, in front of cameras, in front of reporters, in front of thousands watching online, one thing became painfully clear. The most dangerous part of that engine might not have been the machine itself. It might have been the pressure behind it.